Hi, everyone. Could we just start out, please, by saying your name and your affiliation?
So I'm Professor Daryl Haggard. I'm at McGill University in the physics department and also with the McGill Space Institute.
And I'm Tracy Webb. I'm also in the physics department and at the McGill Space Institute.
Thank you. And I'm Julie Hlavacek-Larrondo. I'm a professor at the University of Montreal, also in the physics department.
Great, thank you. Next question, maybe you could give us a few lines about what you do for your research and maybe the impact on the world of astrophysics that we can take from that.
Okay, shall I start? Yep. So my work focuses on the biggest black holes in the universe. So I essentially study these black holes and I try to understand what their impact is on their surrounding and eventually the galaxy that they're hosted in. So my research focuses on essentially black holes and galaxies, understanding how galaxies form and evolve across cosmic time.
And I'm an observational astronomer, and what I'm interested in is also galaxies. I'm interested in the processes which form and shape galaxies over time. Primarily, I'm interested in the really energetic phases that galaxies go through, and these are phases of supermassive black hole growth as well as immense bursts of star formation. And I study this using as many different telescopes as I can get my hands on at all different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum.
So you'll sense a theme here. Julie, Tracy, and I actually work together. Sometimes we collaborate on studies of supermassive black holes and how they influence galaxy growth. And so there are a lot of rich interconnections between the growth of black holes and the growth of the galaxies that host them. And so I've studied active galactic nuclei. So those are the ones where the supermassive black holes are actively growing by gas and dust falling into the inner part of the galaxy and onto the black hole. And I have studied them at various times in my career out to very large redshifts and sometimes right here locally in our own Milky Way galaxy at 0 redshift. And occasionally I dabble in other compact objects like white dwarfs and neutron stars, and I'm interested in gravitational radiation. But I think our wonderful intersection is really in the supermassive black hole and galaxy coevolution part of astrophysics.
Great, thank you. So talking about diversity right now, I'd like to know, what does diversity mean to you personally within just the scope of maybe your research area and your environment and astrophysics and physics as a whole?
So I think for me, diversity just means that everybody gets to be involved. And that means that the lines of inquiry come from people at all career stages, from all genders and gender orientations, from all sexes and sexual orientations, and really ideally across the full sort of range of humanity and ethnicity and race. But we don't achieve that at all. So that would be amazing if we actually had all of those brains, all of those minds, all of those generations at the table. But we rarely achieve that in the sciences. I think we end up being fairly narrowly focused on not only the science topics we pursue, but also the people that are pursuing them. And so I think we lose a lot of richness in our inquiries. We lose a lot of the science and discovery space we could be exploring by not having full engagement from the whole population. So I guess diversity to me means trying to just aim toward that higher goal of having everyone involved.
I don't have much to add to that, except that I would say two really important things about diversity are, as Daryl has already said, access, making sure that everyone has the ability to do what they want with their lives and reach their full potentials. And also, diversity gives us a really good opportunity to create role models throughout the age spread, the diversity spread, and that is a way of encouraging people, again, to fulfill their potential and to go into STEM or whatever field they choose.
Just maybe on a personal note, for me, I feel extremely lucky to be able to study astrophysics. It's my passion. I love doing this. And the fact that there's a lack of diversity in physics or in STEM in general, for me, it means that not everybody has this opportunity potentially to study something that they love. And for me, that's why it's important to act on it and improve diversity in STEM.
Great. So speaking of studying your passion, I'd like all of you to tell me maybe a little bit about your journey through higher education and entering academia. Maybe who were your role models coming into it, and how did your interest in astrophysics and studying black holes arise?
Okay, so we can start maybe locally. So I'm from Montreal. So I grew up in Montreal. My background is essentially I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. My mom's also a scientist. She got her PhD from McGill in chemistry, and so I grew up in that environment, and that was one of my strongest role models in my life. And so I never felt that I couldn't actually succeed because I had this strong role model there. And then eventually I went to high school in Montreal, CEGEP, and along the way, that's when I had several mentors that introduced me to physics and more generally to astrophysics. And it was the opportunities they gave me to do specific projects in astrophysics and things like that that made me discover this field. So I'm very grateful for those mentors. They definitely had a very important impact in my life.
Yeah, so I have to think back a little. I myself grew up in Ontario, and I went through the standard public school system. I don't come from a long line of scientists. I come from a teacher and an accountant. But I was always told that I could do anything I wanted. And I was told that by my parents. I was told that by my teachers. And I was presented with a vast array of things that I could do and told to choose, and that the world was my oyster, essentially. And I fell in love with astrophysics when I was very young. And I knew from the very beginning that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know it was called astrophysics at the time. I just knew it was stars and planets and galaxies. But I never questioned that I could do that. And I think it was largely because I had this, not so much mentorship, but people telling me that I could do whatever I wanted.
So we're spiraling out. We started in Montreal, Ontario. I was raised in New Mexico in the United States. I grew up under very nice, beautiful, dark night skies. I'm sure that influenced me indirectly. But like actually Julie and Tracy, so my mother and father were in science fields. My mother was trained as a biologist. My father is a mathematician, both educators. So I think these are common themes that you actually hear from scientists. A lot of us were raised around scientists, and a lot of us were raised around educators. So people who really saw the potential in young people and encouraged and fostered that and really helped sort of say, those words that you can do whatever you're excited about or inspired by. So I grew up, kind of in and out of a variety of different schools, but not because my family traveled a lot, just because of, I guess, my transient nature. But I went rather accidentally as an undergraduate into a philosophy program and studied philosophy for a while. And then when I finished my undergraduate, I explored and lived in China and Silicon Valley and other places, and then I kind of migrated back towards science. And so I'll echo not only that you can pursue whatever you want, but you don't have to decide all in one monolithic moment that it will be this one thing. I tried a lot of different things out, and I felt a longing to return to science when I did decide to pursue it as an academic and an eventual career choice. And so that was exciting. And then I was very lucky, and I've been lucky along the way to have wonderful research mentors. So people who were willing to take me in, teach me how to use tools and how to pursue projects and what it meant to be an observational astronomer. And so there are people, I think, at every stage in my career who have been willing to show me how it's done. And that kind of apprenticeship, I think, in science is enormously engaging and really helpful in keeping all of us sort of actively participating.
Great. Moving along, we've talked about some of the opportunities that you all had and what got you into it. But going along the way, paths aren't always smooth. What are some of the difficulties that you faced getting into astrophysics and research?
So I already mentioned that I was trained in a different kind of undergraduate degree, and so retraining into physics in a kind of a contemporary physics setting was I did a lot of history of science in my undergraduate, but not a lot of like using a scientific calculator and understanding exactly kind of what all of the sort of common undergraduate preparation would have been. So I had to retrain, and that took a long time. So for me, I think the investment of years and a lot of sort of figuring out whether or not that investment was going to be worthwhile was a challenge, and that ended up colliding in a good way and a bad way with the growth of my family. I had my first child while I was a graduate student. I met my husband as a graduate student as well, and in many ways, I think I'm happy about that. I did not choose career over family. They just grew along together. But it does make, I think that I wrote my entire PhD, while my child was under a year old. So these are definitely challenges, but they're no more challenging than for people working in other careers, I don't think. It's just, you have to really decide that you're excited enough to keep at it.
Yeah, I think for me too, one of the biggest challenges was the commitment and the amount of energy that was required to succeed in science. It's a long road. You don't get a lot of breaks. You have to keep at it. You don't have to, but many women put things on hold. So Daryl is the exception, but I waited until I was
older.
You're older.
I'm just an old lady.
I certainly felt like I put a lot of my life on hold until I was settled. And that was something that I found very frustrating, and was, if I could point to one thing that was the most difficult, it was sometimes watching my friends move forward with their lives while I felt I was still in school, and still acting as an apprentice in many ways, and not a full part of society yet. So that's really what I found the most challenging.
I don't know, for me, it's maybe a bit different. So for me, one of the biggest challenges was when I was growing up, because my mom was alone. It was financially difficult to go through schooling, and I remember that my mom worked very hard, and it was getting those scholarships that really helped, and so that was just a challenge getting to the degree. And then just once you're there, it's just you're very happy to be there. And I remember that I had my son when I just started my faculty position, which was extremely exhausting. But you make it happen, and it works. Just one day at a time, it works. Anything else?
Okay. You're in the middle. You keep like the second person, yeah.
Going through your higher education and your careers, were there any instances where you felt you were treated differently because you were a woman?
So I have to say that I've been extremely lucky, I think, in that regard, in that I've continually had people encouraging me through my entire career. And I've certainly felt that I was being treated as a woman, but not in a detrimental way. And there have been times when I feel I'm on a committee because they need a token woman. But to be frank, I'm happy to be there. And I'm happy to add diversity to that committee and to make sure that some of the issues that are relevant to diversity are looked at. So so I really don't have anything negative to say in terms of the experiences that I've had on my path forward, which might be an exception.
No, I don't know if it's an exception or not. So I have worked ever since I rejoined the sciences as a graduate student, originally as a master's student studying physics. I've always worked on equity and inclusion projects. So I feel like I have always been in a conversation about equity and inclusion ever since I started being a scientist. Does that mean I was treated differently or not? I really have no perspective on what the other looks like. So it's hard to say that I was or was not treated. I was never targeted, and I don't have any negative experiences to report as a woman scientist. I was harassed by an employer before I returned to sciences in Silicon Valley. So I have certainly felt targeted as a woman in my life, but not so much as a scientist. or a student of the sciences. But I have worked a lot on committees around not only gender equity in the sciences, but also diversity more and inclusion more broadly defined. And I had the unlucky, maybe lucky, difficult position of sitting on the Committee for the Status of Women in Astronomy right when some of our big sexual harassment scandals came out over the last few years. We've had several faculty sort of be revealed as sort of repeat harassers, and that was a very difficult position to be in while our community reacted and experienced the sort of the pain and realization of kind of some long-standing ills in our community, and what the repercussions of that are. How do we catalog those things? How do we keep track of it? How do we make our young people and our senior people and all of our people safe? And so those are challenges, but they're challenges, again, like Tracy, they're ones that somebody needs to be working actively on, and I don't think that I felt that I was there as an extra burden. It's just a hardship to manage difficult situations. And so I think that's true for everyone.
So for the question about if I had to face challenges, particularly because I'm a woman, I haven't felt that. I remember when I first started my studies in physics, I just went in there because I loved physics and that's it. And I knew that there were less women in physics, but I just thought that's how it is and that's it. But it was later on when I started getting involved in these committees and talking more about diversity and the barriers that minorities have to face, extra barriers compared to other people, then that's when I started thinking more about diversity. And so I've been asked also to be on more committees, things like that, which is, it's okay. And maybe just one thing that I remember that kind of really pushed me and motivated me to work in diversity is I remember when I first got the faculty position at U of Montreal, one of my friends actually told me, "Oh, you probably just got it because you're a woman." And it surprised me because I knew this person, and it was, for me, it was very difficult to hear that because I knew, no, it was because of certain reasons I'm here and I deserve to be here. But it's interesting that people still think like that.
I just wanted to add something to that, which I think it's important to remember when we're answering this question, that the three of us here are examples of women who have made it, possibly because we've had an easier time. And it would be interesting to ask that question to a lot of the women who have dropped out, and they may have very different stories to tell than we do.
Well, I was just saying, so Eloise asked us about whether or not we'd experienced sexism. And at first, I think all of us were like, no, we're great, we're here. And then you start to remember and think, oh, yeah. So when I was TAing as a graduate student, I actually did have, and I think the most sexism I have gotten is actually from students when I'm in a position of power. And that's a little surprising because you'd think, oh, maybe this is usually top down. But my experience is it's actually usually bottom up for me. I mean, I don't think that's always true. That's probably not even the norm. But I have had students, write comments like, why don't you wear this particular outfit more often? Or, just sort of generally sort of sneery and gendered commentary and evaluations and sometimes in actual classroom settings. And so that is a little bit, that is not exactly the experience that you want when you're sort of newly instructing a classroom.
Yeah, I would just echo that. The largest problem I feel that I've had is getting people to take me seriously, and I have experienced that with students, mostly with students because they're the ones who I'm often trying to get to take me seriously. But I again, as we sit here and we talk, I can remember comments from colleagues as well about whether or not I could actually stand up in front of a classroom and be taken seriously. And I assume that is because I don't fit the usual mold of a physicist. And in people's minds, you have to fit that mold if what comes out of your mouth is going to be taken as serious physics. So it's something I struggle with even today, trying to make sure that I appear serious and trustworthy when I'm discussing, while still being approachable and myself.
Moving on maybe to a more positive note, what are some positive experiences that you've had as women in astrophysics, either relating to being a woman or just in general situations where you felt that you were being treated as an equal and where diversity was winning out?
Okay, so I was just a part of this really exciting gravitational wave discovery, and I was telling Julie and Tracy right before. So it was an enormous collaboration of people. It was just a huge, many thousand ring circus. And one of the things, as I like truly battled for my science case throughout a lot of it, and felt some dark and negative thoughts, I'll confess, toward other people. I just would look around me sometimes and realize how many women were at the table. So I was negotiating with a telescope director who was a woman. I consulted another telescope director who I wanted director's discretionary time from, and that was also a woman. My competitors were women. My mentors and seniors in the situation were women. I mean, it was just amazing to look around and realize that sitting at the table were women from all over the world. And in fact, in my particular case, just the accident of this particular niche of X-ray observations of this one particular object, it was all women. And that was kind of amazing. So occasionally, it's not even so much like it was better or worse because it was women. It was just really rewarding to know that we're not holding our own. We're like leading the path, and that's or forging the direction. And it's pretty exciting and awesome. And I think that is really the sign of sort of a mature field in some of these ways. So I mean, medicine and other fields have a strong representation of women, but it's I think astrophysics is unique in that we have a lot of really strong leadership from women in our field, and we're lucky, and we're hopefully embracing that.
Yeah, so I would say that too. I think this collaboration that we have is a fun example of that, where we're three women who have come together quite by accident and are now working together. I would say a lot of the positive experiences that I've had have often been ones of surprise. Small things. I'm thinking, for example, of when I was a master's student, I had to take a quantum mechanics course. And it so happened that the entire course was female, except for the instructor, which was unheard of at the time, and which wasn't that long ago. And I remember he walked into the room, looked around, and then walked out again, because he obviously thought he was in the wrong place. And it was so funny, and he came back in, and he was so happy to be part of this amazing moment, and this class that had a completely different feel to it. And it was just fun. And so there have been lots of experiences like that where I've found myself in situations that are unexpected, and everybody is really happy and excited and just really glad to see the diversity.
I can maybe mention another aspect is I remember that every single mentor that I had when I was at the undergrad level was from a male professor, and they fully supported my dream of becoming a scientist, and it had nothing to do whether I was a woman or a man, just because I loved science. And so that was good that I had this support from this diverse group also. And the other thing that I can maybe mention is we've gotten very active at U of Montreal in terms of diversity, and I thought that when I first arrived as a faculty, I started this committee on diversity at the university, and I thought that it would be a battle to build this committee, but the response was just so positive. So many people from men, women, minorities, any kind, just wanted to get implicated, and they saw the importance of this. And so I felt that now the times are very positive in a way that everybody wants to get involved and make a difference. And that's something that I've been also noticing in the field, in astronomy in general. 10 years ago, I would say that we knew diversity was a problem, but not many people were particularly active. But now, through several committees, there are actions that are being taken, and that there's actually potential progress that's coming. So I feel that that's something that's changed in the field in the last 10 years or so.
That's a great segue into the next question. What improvement have you seen since you were starting your undergraduate degrees or getting into the field?
Did you want to start? Or do you want
Yeah, I can say something more about that. So I remember when I was an undergrad, we had no diversity committee. We barely talked about it. We knew it was an issue, but there was nothing really being done. And then I remember that it was more at my graduate level where I started hearing about the committee, the Status on Women Committee from the AAS, from the American Astronomical Society. They started actually getting involved in doing things about it, and it's just escalated since then. There are more and more groups that are joining. We now have a Canadian equivalent of this committee. It's the Equity and Equality Committee of CASCA, which is the Canadian Astronomical Society. So no, I see there's progress, and I'm very excited for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would say there's been a lot of progress when it comes to women in physics. Certainly the makeup of the McGill physics department mirrors that. And we now have, I want to say 8, but I've basically lost count. And which is fantastic because it gives us a critical mass to really start to do things and to form a committee and to have events and to mentor. I would say I don't know that other minorities in STEM and in physics in particular have enjoyed the same growth. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. I think that it snowballs when you get a critical mass of one particular type of person who can then see themselves mirrored in their colleagues and in mentors. But there's still a lot of work to do for some other groups.
Yeah, so I'll just echo both of those, that I think that the awareness has grown. I think we have, with that come new challenges. So for a while, I think we did sort of sit in this very binary thing where there was sort of, diversity meant women in science. I don't think that that's ever been true, but and I think that sort of broader awareness, as Tracy was saying, is starting to grow and coming along. And of course I want women represented, but it would also be lovely to have people of all ability statuses represented, of people of, really representing society as a whole, not sort of seeming so niche-y, as if academia could only reflect this one particular segment of society. And I think the other great challenge is that we are starting, as I educate myself, so a lot of this is about self-education and taking the time to read and learn about these kinds of issues, but intersections of minoritized identities are particularly hard. So just an example of that might be, not only a woman, but a woman of, African Canadian status. So that's maybe 2 minority statuses that now you have to manage. Add on another third, maybe that person has a non-binary gender identity, or I don't know, take any combination of things that you might imagine. And those are challenge on top of challenge on top of challenge, and that those intersections of identity are really difficult, and they're complicated, right? It's a real complexity problem, and I don't think that our committees are yet sophisticated enough that we're handling that really intelligently. But I think that awareness is growing, and as the awareness grows, we'll get more sophisticated, and we have to stop being sort of ignorant of society and ignorant of all of these responsibilities we have, because it doesn't really help in academia, right? We work with students, we work with huge classrooms full of students who belong to all of these identities, right? And so in order for us to be effective at communicating with them, we can't pretend that it's not there, right? So I think it's getting better. At least we're getting a little more aware of all the things that we as yet are not working hard enough on.
Continuing along that line of thought, what do you think is the number one thing right now in astronomy and astrophysics that is a challenge and a barrier towards diversity?
Yeah.
So as Daryl was saying, we're definitely more aware of diversity-related problems, but I don't think we know what the solutions are. There's definitely research going into that to try and find a solution that works, but I'm not sure we've identified ones that actually do work. we've noticed that in terms of, there was an interesting statistic in terms of the number of women in physics at the bachelor's level over the years. And it seems that it may be even dropping in the last couple of years. And this was a study done by the American Physical Society, which is a little bit worrisome. So I would say, yeah, it's just finding the good solutions that will actually make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think physics and astronomy is a science, and we want to be data-driven, and we want to know what the solution is before we implement it. And there's lots of people who have very good ideas, but I think the jury is still out really on what the best solutions are.
So I think the other thing that I've seen in my work on committees is that it's not really always clear how we express ourselves or whether or not we are responsive enough. So I can say this from the time that I spent working with the Committee on the Status of Women in Astronomy in the American Astronomical Society, that over the 3 years that I sat on that committee, I would say that there were scandals and revelations that were very painful and difficult for the community, but there were also many friction points about communication and responsiveness. So when things go wrong, how do professionals react? So as professionals in the classroom, as professionals as a part of a membership society, what is our reaction? And do we owe our community a reaction? Or do we just say, look, we're here to talk about astronomy and astrophysics. We promote astronomy and astrophysics. Anything that I don't perceive as astronomy and astrophysics is secondary to that. And then you have a young, African and Canadian person say, I'm an astrophysicist, so how is an issue that's affecting me not astrophysics, right? And I think that there's a real tension about what are our responsibilities as universities, as academics, as professionals are for responding to difficult either situations in the political regime or in the social regime. I mean, these are things that university professors work with and have to deal with all the time, and it is not clear to me that we know what we're doing or that we even know how to not make things worse, frankly, sometimes.
We talked a little bit earlier about, touched upon quickly, having children and balancing a family and a life. How do you personally, right now during your careers, maintain a healthy balance between your career and your family? And how did you maintain this in the past? What were the challenges that you faced going through that?
You just assume that we do maintain a healthy balance between our work and our lives. And you can see all three of us starting to giggle, like, what are you talking about, Eloise? Yeah, I think you do it. Julie said this earlier. It's just every day, every hour, right? And you don't always prioritize career, and you don't always prioritize family, and it hurts both times, both ways. And you just make the decision real time every step of the way. And I don't mean to speak for my two colleagues here, but I have the impression anyway that we're all partnered very successfully with very, very intelligent people who work as hard at maintaining both a career and our family life as we do. And I will say that for me anyway, speaking just for myself, that makes an enormous difference. So having that partnership, Julie mentioned, being raised in a single family home. Mine was a split home. And I think that that's an extra challenge that I don't face, and that support that I get from my spouse is just enormous. And he's also a scientist. He's amazing. He's an amazing father. And we all get lucky sometimes, and we have extra people, right? Grandparents, partners, that network of friends, family, whatever it is that makes up your support group, I think is just vital. And it's vital for your science, and it's vital for your family. It's vital for all of it.
Yeah, I think being lucky enough to have a supportive network around you is crucial. And whether that's a partner or relatives, family. I think, too, one thing that really helps, and again, I have to talk about the McGill Physics Department, is that as you build diversity, expectations change as well. And I think that having colleagues who themselves expect to be able to have a strong work-life balance around me is really important. If I was the only one struggling to raise a family within a sea of people who had nothing else to worry about except for science, it would be a very different situation. So I see my male colleagues struggling just as much as I do, and we support each other, and the department supports us, and the university hopefully supports us as well at all levels. So it's really a support network. You can't do this on your own.
I completely agree. I feel that I've grown to be somebody very independent, but when it comes to balancing life and work and all of that, the network is just so important, and it just makes things so much easier and happier. And so I just take one day at a time. I'm not afraid to ask for help from my friends or family when I need a babysitter. Or it's just that network makes complete difference.
One interesting question that we've heard some other responses from: if we were to give you an unlimited budget and unlimited power to change whatever you could, what would you do to get more people, and especially more children, interested in the sciences as a whole, and maybe a specific comment on getting them into maybe astronomy and astrophysics?
Whew, okay. Do I start? Yeah. Okay. Wow, that would be amazing. I would launch a national campaign. Just go at it 100%. I would definitely invest in the research to see what is the best option and what age do we need to target and how do we do this. But I would definitely start with the schools. I would start also, one of the things that's always kind of just amazed me is you go into a store and let's say Toys R Us or something, and you see there are different toys for boys and girls, and you see how different it is. And I would try, if I had an unlimited budget, I would also try to tackle that at the base society in general, trying to address that. But yes, unlimited budgets are rare.
Well, if we're talking unlimited, I think you said $1 million, but
Not really unlimited. We have really expensive telescopes, Eloise. So.
Wave a magic wand and
Yeah.
give you the unlimited budget.
the unlimited budget. So I have to agree with Julie that I think the first place I would start would be with children, because I think that's where we lose everyone that we lose. But with an unlimited budget, I think we could attack every point along what we call the leaky pipeline. And we could improve things like childcare, increase those support networks, do things that allow people who don't have support networks to also succeed in science. I'm thinking anything from half-time positions to, well, I don't know, the possibilities are endless with an unlimited budget. But I do think the place to concentrate is with young people. But I think, as Julie said, it has to be you have to launch a full-scale attack. You don't just want to send people into schools, once a week to be the token scientist and to do some fun magic tricks. You need to make STEM part of everybody's everyday life and make it seem like anyone can succeed in the field if they want to.
I'm not sure I have too much to add to that. I agree. I think young people are important, and I think that maybe to just pick up on Tracy's last statement, that the meaningfulness or the sort of depth of the interaction is really important. So we can and do, and people make incredible efforts to just get in and have an intervention, but those interventions tend to be short. And they aren't echoed throughout society. So you still have these experiences every time you go shopping for your kids that things seem extremely gendered, or even for yourself, quite honestly, things seem extremely gendered. And I think that is something that, our kids are just too smart not to know about that, right? They see it around them all the time. So having somebody excited come in once a year is just not enough to show them that it's a different thing. So we experience all kinds of stereotype threat and all sorts of things where people just, when they don't conform to the stereotype, they don't imagine that there's a place for them there. And that affects everyone who doesn't look like some sort of archetypical thing, right? And so I've read little tidbits, but it's so piecemeal, right? So people are starting to change image archives and stuff to actually include, women, not the secretary. And actually, I think administrative assistants are amazing, so that's no comment on that. But but just to give a more kind of rich and varied set of visual images to our young people and ourselves, quite honestly, just everybody. But it requires a much more sustained effort. And I think all of our very short little blips of intervention are probably fine, but I don't think that they're really formative for all of our stages of education.
What advice would you have for someone who is interested in going into academia?
I'll start. So if somebody wants to pursue an academic career, I will tell you my two favorite pieces of advice. One is you just have to be willing to stick with it. It's a long road. It's a long haul. You are smart enough. You're good enough. You're excellent enough. You're probably even inspired enough and brilliant enough. But none of that matters if you can't stay the course over what feels like a gruelingly long period of time. And that's not just until you get your PhD or get your master's degree or get your undergraduate degree. That includes a whole set of training stages that we put after all that stuff, like being a postdoc or being a research scientist, all of which are great. But that there's more years in there, and you're earning money that whole time, so it's not like it's not bad. It's a job, but it's a long apprenticeship, basically. The other thing I would throw out there is that there are tons of really cool, rewarding careers that aren't purely academic, and they include astrophysics. So data science is just exploding, and astrophysics is full of the best data in the entire universe for training algorithms. There is no personal information in stellar spectra. So you can just use that data to your heart's content, and that makes for some really, really interesting other career prospects that include, higher education, include PhDs and some of this sort of mentoring that we get as scientists.
So I would say a couple of things to the budding academic. The first, and I'm speaking directly to you, the first is nobody else has any idea what they're doing either. You think that you are struggling and fighting your way forward in this highly competitive field, and everyone is doing the same thing. You are as smart and as brilliant and as determined as the person sitting next to you, and don't let anybody tell you differently. As Daryl said, you just have to stay the course. It gets easier, you get better at the job, and there are some amazing rewards in academia waiting for you if you do stay the course. And some of those rewards are practical, such as flexibility in your schedule, but some of them are also the ability to do what you love and to have absolute freedom to pursue your goals. And these are things that are worth fighting for. So don't give up.
So one thing I would say, it depends on what stage that person is at. If that person is maybe just starting their undergrad, I would say if you want to go into astrophysics, one thing that, at least in academia, is that you're going to do research. And so make sure that you like research, and you can do this through summer internships, master's degree, and because that's going to be a big part of your life is actually doing research. And honestly, when I started my undergrad, I had no idea what research meant. I didn't really know when you do research, what do you really do? So that's something that I just learned and that I fell in love with. So for me, it was very clear. But I would say just make sure that you're aware of this. And once you know that this is what you want to do, just go for it. Don't give up. Persevere. You're going to get a lot of probably no's or rejections. We still do at the faculty level, but you just keep going. And once you get those acceptances, then it's just completely, it's amazing, and it's totally worth it. And that's what I would say. Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
I have one final thought. Physics is absolutely awesome. And yeah, go for it.
I have a final thought that's also sort of combined with the sort of maybe the tone of career advice that Julie had. And that is that being a scientist doesn't mean that you're locked in your office all the time thinking deeply about deep thoughts about astrophysics or neutron stars or black holes. We actually spend a lot of our time writing, like tons and tons of our time writing and speaking and communicating. It's a very networked and social field. This is true for all sciences, and it's particularly true in our field where we work in collaborative settings like the large majority of the time. And so really try to work on those skills. So work on your skills in communications and in collaboration. They end up being very valuable, as valuable as some of the sort of more technical skills that you're learning maybe in your coursework and otherwise.
Okay, so maybe I'll just finish with a big picture, which is that we've been talking a lot about our own experiences and how wonderful it is personally to be a scientist. But I maybe just want to flip diversity on its head for a minute and say how wonderful it is for science to be diverse as well. Daryl's touched on this a little bit, but the more people we allow to access science, the more brilliant minds we have working on the world's problems and gaining knowledge. And so we don't want to shut somebody out. We don't want to shut out the next Einstein because they don't fit the mold that Einstein helped stereotype. We want to bring as many people in through diversity as we can, and that can only better science by bringing in more minds.